Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Commerce What's Up Enterprise podcast, where we explore the latest technology trends across the industries with leading experts from around the globe. Today, I'm welcoming back Blake Eastman over here. I'm super excited to have him on this guy.
Yeah, great to be
Um,
back.
yeah, it's great to have you back. I was reading one of your emails, and I'm so blessed to be able to get one of your emails. You have a lot of insight and wisdom, and you were talking about, that you wanted to have add value in the world. That's how I was reading. I was like, gosh, I mean, for me, you had a tremendous value. And this
Yeah.
last one was particularly super interesting. And I do want to talk about it, but also hopefully we can talk a little bit more about where you're heading with how you're helping people, the technology that you're using. So we'll get into some of that. But I do think it's this email that you recently sent, and I encourage you guys, if you are not on this email, you got to get with Blake and get on this email. But this one was particularly good. There's a little bit of sad component to it, but it's eye opening what you talk about. I'll let you talk about that for a minute. But you mentioned it's everything about intention, and I think that you're so right. And yeah, if you could just share with everyone
Yeah.
about that email. I thought it was a fantastic place to start.
Yeah. So the email was basically just about sort of my father. So my dad has ALS. He's in the late stages of ALS and is like fully paralyzed. I could only like communicate with his eyes. And how I was talking about is like there's a lot of lessons that come from that, and it's changed my life in a lot of ways. But the big thing that I was focusing on was the concept of intention. So it's like we never really understand how long we have left on the planet. Like there's this assumption that we're going to live to 70 or 80 or 90 or 100, but like at the end of the day, like everybody listening to this, you don't know for certain every single second if you're going to be alive or not, right? Like people
Eh,
drop dead of heart attacks, and or there's accidents, things happen. And I was highlighting this notion of like I want to live a more intentional life, in the sense that like where I'm spending my time doesn't matter what I'm actually doing. What matters is that I'm more intentional while doing it. So even like something like rest, like
Oh, that's a good one.
like at the end of the day, you sit down and you're off and you're watching TV. Like being intentional and saying that like, all right, I'm really resting right now. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to check emails. I'm not going to like I'm going to truly rest right now. Or working out or spending time with people, and just the having a more intentional life. And I've always been attracted by people that I feel like are very intentional, like who are just like they want to get what they need to get done, or the kind of person that shows up to a business meeting and like puts away their phone and like really looks at you and really pays attention and isn't in another place. So just being more intentional with my time was the focus of the email.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's you outlined some really good points, and one of them was how we're using that time effectively in that moment, like being present. And last night, you'll like this. I was out Monday nights. Sherry and I, my sister, we'll go out and do karaoke.
Cool.
And sometimes I'm like, gosh, do I want to be there? And I never want to be the guy that does the same song twice. So I'm like, I really don't have a good song for this evening. But last night, I said basically like what your email is. I'm going to intentionally enjoy myself. I'm going to be there in
Mm,
this moment and really just absorb what's going on. And it was so amazing, so intense. It was just letting myself be entertained and interactive with the people that were there. So I only sang like twice, but which is actually a lot probably, but the people that were singing, I was really just experiencing what they were experiencing, and it was phenomenal. And I get
cool.
what you mean. We don't know that next moment. You just don't know. I My cousin passed away a while back, but he was just heading to his car to put his tools back, and then he just passed away
Yeah.
for no reason. And the other point that you were making about when you have an intention, your focus and energy is different. I totally got that. And like while
Mm,
I'm sitting there doing karaoke, I can experience this. I was like, this is even my daughter. And I noticed even with my intention being focused, like I'm really gonna have a good time. I'm gonna absorb everyone else's good time and energy. I noticed that even my daughter and then Sherry, of course, and my mom,
mhm.
their focus and intention elevate it to that level. And my daughter was literally saying, "This is the best time we've ever had at one of these events." And maybe it was also the event, but I
Yeah.
also think maybe
You're
it
more
was
present.
more present.
Yeah.
I did have my phone out here and there, but yeah, this that email I thought that you put out was absolutely phenomenal in a sense that
Thank you.
and I'll tell you that I also love podcasts because I love to hear what people are doing well
Mm.
with what they're working on. And like you said, I enjoy people who have that. They come to the meeting, they're intent, and they know exactly what their purpose is. I can't tell you, there's so many times in my life where like I'm just sitting around going, what am I have no focus right now.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible place to be, honestly. Like you're
Yeah,
just
it's normal though. Like there's like that's the whole thing. I think when you listen to like any like self-development or concepts, there's this inclination to think that like I want to become that thing, right? So like, oh, I want to become way more present or I want to become way more intentional. And the truth is like it's human behavior is not one in which we flip a switch. I mean, there's sometimes examples of that, but I feel like they're kind of edge cases. What tends to happen is if like you want to change, it's like being more intentional for 10 minutes every day is like a bigger win than anything else. Like if you're more intentional for or let's say you're just more intentional with the way that you're with your family or with your work or with your workouts or like just breaking it down to something that's like small and manageable as opposed to like yeah, because that's not how it works. Like I've had these experiences and it's like my intentionality has gone up incredibly over the past maybe like incredibly is not really a word but significantly over the past like 18 months, but from day one to day two, it didn't look that much different. Like these, it's slower than people think. And I think that there's people make themselves wrong if it's not like, yeah, if you were more intentional at karaoke than you've ever been before, it doesn't really matter if you check your phone 5 times. It's still a progress, right? Like
yeah.
you're moving towards a better direction. And I think it's a really important concept whenever you're changing behavior.
Yeah, I just that one experiment actually. It was kind of an experiment because I wasn't sure I really wanted to go, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can intentionally like just be present and absorb everyone else's excitement. And
Mm.
it for whatever I mean, whatever it was, it seemed to really change everything. Maybe
Yeah.
it was just for me, but I literally it was I was having such a good time. If I probably saw a video of myself, and I think people did take video, I might look like a fool to myself because I just let myself do
No, you let
whatever
yourself go and you were
I did.
creating a moment for yourself. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
like the reality is our perception, many people sort of you can sculpt how you experience the world. So this is not something that's happening to you, it's something that you're an active role in, right? Like the best example is this: like you could be having the worst day, you're tired, you're frustrated, you're stressed, whatever, worst day, and I could come along and say like, hey, like you've just been, it's so crazy, but you're gonna get awarded this contract. That's a complete game changer for you. And just hearing that piece of information, your whole entire state changes just with that.
1 second. Yeah.
Right. 1 second. Everything. Oh my God. I'm so excited. I'm no longer tired. Let's get to work. This is going to be such a different thing. Like that just shows how humans are just such leaves in the wind, like at the effect of whatever's happening around them. And like the true locus control is to have like the power to recreate or create those moments wherever you go.
Yeah,
Uh,
you mentioned that. Like that you could just create this like right now as you're walking. You talk
yeah.
about that.
Yeah. It's like also like in a conversation with somebody, like if you're talking to someone and the conversation's not, let's say it's like you're having small talk or it's boring. It's like, well, you you're 50% of that conversation. Like you could create a more engaged conversation right now. So I just believe that having the approach or understanding that you have like 100% responsibility or 100% power in all your life is way better than being at the effect of or like, oh, this person's not interesting, therefore the conversation's not interesting. It's like, well, you're a contributing factor in that.
Yeah, you get to take, you're a participant in that
100%.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I so I've always been fascinated by what you do. Like, I mean, you truly have created. I mean, you have a scientific approach around how to study behavior, but also how that we can benefit as people. And you make a statement about, hey, you want to have impact in people's lives. I believe you do. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just me out there, even just, you take this time to really write these emails out, and you may not always hear me every time I go back, but every time I read it, it does leave an impact. And I'm like,
Thank
this
you.
is fantastic. So you're doing some really interesting things also, I think, not just, in the way you apply and work with people, but you're also intertwining and integrating technology into what you're doing. And I sent you a note saying, gosh, just be fascinating, because I'm not sure of how to perceive myself, like even when I'm doing these podcasts.
Mm.
Like, sometimes I get so lost, I'm really focused on the other person. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just like, I want to hear this person talk. And yeah, so tell us a little bit more about, like, this what you're working on. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so we have this program. It's a couple of things. So I have like two companies. I have the nonverbal group, and then I have this company, Behavioral Robotics, which is developing like a lot of technology that the nonverbal group uses. And basically, you hear like a lot of body language advice or whatever, and a lot of it is not really grounded in any sort of truth. The truth is like everybody, when you're watching someone, is having a slightly different version of reality. So like 150 people listen to a podcast and they all listen to it. And while they're listening to it, they're going through an experience, right? So some people are hearing something that I've said and they're like, oh, wow, like I really liked it. Other people are like, I've heard that before. I'm not interested. Like, so you don't have this sort of uniform, everybody's perceiving somebody the same exact way. But what we do have is we have like these trends and patterns in society that are a byproduct of a bunch of things. But like I think more towards this theory called predictive processing and how we sort of understand basically it's the mechanism for how we perceive the world. And there are certain things that sort of are triggers for those experiences. So, for example, like head nodding. Like if you're in a conversation with someone, you nod your head when they talk, right? Like you're doing it right now, right? You're not nodding your head for you. You're nodding your head for me. So, like that's a behavioral thing. That's a byproduct of what we call social coordination. Your head nodding to coordinate with me, showing me that you understand what I'm saying, right? So, what we
now,
find, yeah, it's getting your head
now I'm
right.
like,
I know,
oh,
I know.
so we're in
So
this.
then, like, if you do, what's so funny is this: like, if you start getting in your head about head nodding, you're like, what? Do I nod quick? Do I nod slow? Am I nodding too much? Am I nodding too little? Like, it's all of that. But the truth is, like, if you have somebody on a conversation, like if in an hour long conversation somebody doesn't nod their head once, they're probably going to have some problems with perception.
Wow.
So people are going to perceive that person to be whatever, not likable, not engaged, not paying attention. It doesn't mean that they're not paying attention. There's people that can look at you dead in the eyes, not shake their head, not smile, not smirk, and really get a lot of value outside of what you're saying. They just don't socially coordinate. So a lot of like facial expressions analysis or discussion has gone in the area of emotion. So a lot of people are trying. That's one of my big things. Like I think emotion is too broad of a category. Like we lump everything as like emotion and logic. Like the reality is you have like emotion and perspective and temper, like all these bigger things and themes. But you're not in social constructs. You're not always reading emotion. You're reading people's ability to socially coordinate. So like you can make an argument that if I'm hearing you talk, this is where it gets weird, right? Like we socially coordinate in dynamics. So I could not be interested in what you're saying at all. Like I could be completely bored by it, but I could still be shaking my head like I am interested. And it kind of creates this philosophical discussion of like, is that authentic? Is that inauthentic? Is that rude? Is that honest? Like it's tricky, right? Because at one point, if I really don't like what you're saying and I'm really bored, I could be like, this is not interesting. I'll talk to you later and walk away. But that like violates social norms. And that's like weird. But on the other hand, if I'm too like, oh, I'm super agreeable, people
That's
don't like
weird.
it, right? Like, so there's this nuance to behavior that is just not really spoken about. And we use software to sort of document and understand that. So like
That's
building
crazy.
systems that can like could basically map your head nodding and tell you that like you nod a certain way. And what's interesting is this is like there's not these universal themes, but I like if we had a camera on you and we recorded every single one of your interactions for like 6 months and we ran analysis on just head nodding, we'd probably be able to determine like a cadence, a speed, and a style to your head nod that when you're interested and when you're genuinely disinterested. Right. So
That's so weird. Yeah.
it's not like because you'll do things like you won't be really interested, but you'll be looking at someone and you'll be like, okay, because you know that you have to nod your head in this dynamic, but doesn't mean that you're actually genuinely interested. So that's like people have the social world and social perception. Then you also have like a person's internal state. Like there's all the it's so much more complex than like if someone smiles, they like you. If someone shakes their head, they like there's multiple themes here. It's not so simple.
So what kind of organizations or individuals are coming to you for this type of coaching, and why? Like, what are they trying to get at? Do they have a problem with it, or what are
Yeah,
they?
there's two things. Usually, like so from the corporate side, or from the people side, like our we're now getting more to B2C products, which is anybody that feels, I would say that they they struggle or don't feel comfortable in interactions with people. And there's like a thousand reasons on why, whether they perceive themselves to be introverted and social dynamics are very taxing, or they're ruminating or judging themselves in their head about an interaction they had, like how'd I show up. There's that field. But in the business field, it's more direct. It's more like it's either two things. One, they have been told something about themselves and they don't know the reason why. So, for example, they're like, listen, they've gotten 360 feedback that they're like, they don't have empathy and they're really cold and they're really disconnected from other people. And they're like, they can't figure out what it actually is. And then the second thing is that like they need skill sets for a particular circumstance. So, for example, like somebody was managing a team of 6 and now they're managing a team of like 90 and they're not used to dealing with the operational cadence of a 90-person team and the interpersonal dynamics and all that stuff, and they need sort of help. So those are like the two bigger reasons that people come to us whenever there's like a gap. I'm good at solving like people's gap in perception. So like if you want to come across confident and you're not coming across confident, we're good at understanding like why. Like here are the behaviors that, and then here's how to change them. Or if you're coming across disrespectful and you don't understand why, we're good at that. So we're good at mapping out perception to behaviors.
So what are a couple of things that people can do? Simple things that would make a difference. Because I seem to be keenly aware. Like I notice that with people,
Mm.
there are a lot of people, especially consultants, who they don't nod and they make no movement. But I know they're listening because this is a consulting thing I can see. But
Yeah, but it's also multifaceted, right? So like there are power dynamics at play. Like there might be a reason why. So like if I sit there and look at you and don't nod my head, I'm kind of creating a power structure, one in which like I don't need to nod my head for you, right?
wow.
Like so it's more nuanced. Like I've seen managers do that effectively. I've seen managers like create a dynamic where they don't give a lot of acknowledgement, don't nod their head, don't do those types of things, so that when they do it, it's genuinely respected. So like the thing about this is it's really a personal choice. So the thing you really want to do is like you want to think about like, how do you want to be perceived in the world, right? Like if somebody were to describe you or tell stories about you or write certain things down, what would they say? And then you want to make sure your behavior is in alignment with that. So, like, if somebody comes to me and is like, listen, no, I want to be like the tough boss that everybody respects
Hmm.
and everybody fears, it's not, I can make an argument on why that doesn't necessarily work in 2023, but I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Like that's not my job. Like my job is not like convincing you to act a certain way. My job is to make sure that that is the perception that other people have of you. That's what I'm here for. So like I'm personally like some people I'm quick, I'm a little bit all over the place sometimes. I'm like chaotic. There's certain aspects of my communication that some people might highlight. and they might think that that's a bad thing. It's like, no, no, I like that. Like that's the part of me that I like, that I respect. I never want to come across as like too controlled and too. I want to be like casual, like so. But that's not personal choice. So most people, they don't ever choose how they want to be perceived. Like they just think that this is. It's not. A lot of it is in your control. Like if you want to be perceived as
Wow.
more confident, you can be perceived as more confident. Like confidence as a facet of perception and confidence as actually being confident are two different things entirely. So somebody could be the most confident about something and not show it. And somebody could be, that's what the whole notion of con man, right? Confidence man, right? Like con man is somebody who's this false sense or fake confidence.
Hmm.
But like that's the thing. Confidence is just such it goes under like what is confidence? So everybody, like you'd think that confidence is, you ask most people the definition and you say like the belief in what you say, right? That's maybe a statement, but the truth is confidence really is a distribution of how society perceives movement and behaviors in social interactions. That's really what confidence is. So you talk to somebody and they're like, listen, I can make you a lot of money. They're like super confident, and you're like, oh, I really trust this person. Or they're, but all it is just patterns on how you perceive confident behavior.
So do you find that, is your business going up as a result that a lot of our interactions today to managing projects or managing things is more like there's more opportunities to do video communications than there
I
are?
I think yeah, that's one reason. I think why it's also becoming more interesting is that our society is more nuanced than it's ever been. There's more subgroups, different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching business. That it's becoming more challenging to navigate a group, right? So for example, like you could, there's so many things that go in corporate cultures, right? Like, but corporate cultures were way more homogenized in like the early 1950s or 60s. Like some of the things that you could say in the 50s and 60s, you'd lose your job
Right
instantly,
now,
right now,
instant,
right?
yeah.
But it was more homogenized, but now it's more diverse. So like being in a lot of different cultures, like you'll see some cultures that are really about inclusivity, and they genuinely are about inclusivity. Like it's a core functioning aspect of what they want to create at a team and organizational level. Like listen, I always make the argument that like the reason why I want an inclusive culture is not to meet the status quo necessarily, but because when you have a spectrum of ideas and people from different walks of lives in the same room, it creates the best products. Like I believe that, right? Like I believe that like having people raised from different parts of the world and different religions and cultures and all that stuff, like when you bring that all together, it's just the beauty of the spectrum of different people. Like it makes a better product. So I've seen companies that believe in that. And then I've seen other companies that want diversity just because they want to say that they want diversity, right? Like
Oh,
they,
right, right.
they need to show it,
The
right?
quota they're hitting versus
Right. So you go into a culture and you see like, which one is this? Like, is this real? Like, I don't think this is real. Like, there's more nuance to navigate in corporate culture than there ever is. And you got to be tactful. You got to be wise. Like, you got to not offend people. Like, can't get away with that shit anymore. Like,
it. Yeah. I mean, it is tough, literally, because I believe that because there are different cultures, but even just like different parts of the United States,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
clients all over the place, and the culture in the Silicon Valley is very different than the culture in Texas, and those
a
things you have
hundred
to be
percent.
very, very aware of. But I'll tell you, a lot of what allows even our company to be successful or not successful is the ability to navigate that that
Landscape.
landscape.
Yeah.
I mean, because truly, I mean, we're especially in consulting, right? We help companies do global data transformations. These things are massive undertaking, and you need wicked smart people to be able to do that. And sometimes those smart people, they're very analytical, very engineering, and they sometimes may miss the very basic formula of this culture that you have to respect now and understand, because there is it,
Mhm.
I do believe there's value in having the diversity, but for some reason, if you can't get the leadership to get the cultures to blend to work together, it's impossible to get a project over the line.
Yeah.
So I find that we're, a lot of times we're working on that more than the technology. It's like, the technology will get there. Like we have good design and all that stuff. The challenge is this ability for the team to work together as a cohesive like unit with all the different perspectives. And
Yeah.
and in technology, it's even crazier because you have the opinion of a certain technology, you have the
Oh,
personal.
100%.
It's just
Yeah, like,
insane.
you have to create a dynamic where many perspectives are welcome. Most companies are not
Yeah,
like that. So most companies
right.
are like, "Oh, so you're saying do this." And they don't stop and go, "Oh, let me think about why that's a good idea." I'd be like, "Well, that's stupid because of blah, 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 blah." Like, it's just a cultural difference, right? And there's some companies that spend so much time, like, thinking, 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 and don't get anything done. Like, it's more nuanced. I mean, like, one of the things I like to see is, like, all companies are fundamentally broken in so many different ways. It's just the successful ones are less broken than the unsuccessful ones.
Right. Like
It's
even like
so
the
true.
biggest, largest, I won't say
Oh
names,
yeah.
like the biggest, largest corporations, right? They have to be perfect. And they're the most broken. I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, how do you guys even do business in the day?
And they could afford to be broke. Like a company, I think a good example was like Nintendo. Like Nintendo made so much money back in the day.
Yeah.
They just crushed it with like Game Boy and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64. Like they were the dominating force that when PlayStation came in and Xbox came in and they had a hard time dealing with it, they had so much cash. They were like, okay. Like they were able to stay around because they just had a lot of cash from prior success. So like sometimes companies, yeah, I've worked with some companies that I'm like, how the hell, why are you doing it
How-
this way? Like this is so stupid. And then I'm like looking at it, I'm like, there's this line of business, even though it's stupid in the way that I think they're doing it, I'm looking at a piece of the puzzle. The truth is it's making $30 million a year. Like,
exactly.
and then so
Yeah.
that you have a lot of those type of dynamics that are just like they're nuanced and they're weird and but they're
Man,
interesting.
yeah, I could see. So, I mean, I know we haven't brought you in on some of these projects or clients, but I could see huge value. Like you know, I look back at the 25 years of major enterprise transformations, and every single time I could say, "Dang man, if we'd have had Blake there."
Yeah, I mean, it's just a joke. Like, so like the big joke when I ever go into do these kind of organizational change or change management, whatever, is this is you just call out that change management doesn't really work, that it's kind of like a bullshit industry, and everybody shakes their head and agrees because
Yeah,
they know that managing change is so difficult and dealing with organizational change is so hard. So sometimes when you lead an engagement with just acknowledging that this is not going to be some 6 phase like it's going to be hard. You got to get buy-in, you got to get all this stuff, you got to get this. And that's why anything that I've ever done, I always make sure that like my key person is like willing to go to war or willing to really go to battle for this. And I'm talking to the key stakeholders because there's been a lot of times where like I've done some consulting stuff, created some really cool things, and then they're like, "Oh, well, we didn't." They love it, but this is a little more progressive. Than I'm like, "Well, what did I waste my time for doing this?" Right? Like, so a lot of companies say they want change, they don't want change. That's the truth.
yeah.
I
So,
could spit more truth because I'm getting it out of corporate consulting.
well,
They
I'm just
act like they do. They don't.
so this is why I'm curious about what you're building from automation standpoint using AI and technology because sometimes I think people are more willing, it's scary this is the case. They're more willing to take that advice and observation from like, very technical
Yeah,
automated
yeah,
view
yeah,
of
yeah.
things. Oh, cuz not personal. It's like this is just the way it's being analyzed. And I kind of see that that's where there could be a lot of value, especially like we do massive large scale transformations. And yeah, there's technology and stuff, but if I go back 25 years, inevitably the most important component of these things is the change management. And
Yeah,
it's like, it's just like dealing with like, hey, You have people in organizations, especially the really big organizations, like, "I've been doing this 25 years, son, this way, so why the heck would I wanna do
Right.
this now?" That's what we're doing. It's like, "Oh, I don't care what we spent on that. I've been doing this correctly for 25 years." We deal a lot with that kinda attitude, but right now I see there is you have the current, culture, and then, like, the old school culture that's happening at the same time.
Hmm.
But then you also have this advantage where I think regardless of age, if you understand where technology can help you analyze, like, take out some of the personal things around it and just show you and help you analyze what how much more progress, success, and value you could get out of by aligning some of the behavioral things that you just as people we're not able to self-reflect on some of these things. I think this is where organizations like yours and the technology you're working on has a tremendous opportunity. I mean, if like right now, technology, data and analytics is so big, but it can be so painful for organizations because of the total age group and cultures that they're having to deal with. And they need some way or some person or organization to help them capture that and then make those I don't think they're like it's not like you could make this massive adjustment, but there are I bet there's just
Yeah.
common things
Little,
that you
there's
can
little
little
things.
things you can just nail, and life's gonna be so much more smooth in terms of adoption and utilization within these technologies. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. What I'm really hoping happens is, first of all, I'm glad, even though I'm not 100% coached and mentored by you, I still feel somewhat mentored because I
Yeah,
do
taking
read your
some,
your
yeah, of
emails and
course.
stuff. But I think that I'm hoping that our clients also will see this and really start to think about this. Like, hey, there is a technology perspective and game plan and architecture that we're working towards, but should we also be thinking about, should we spend a percentage of that time and effort on correcting some of the behavioral things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing in change management is focusing on framing the change to be the benefit of the person that's having to do it. So what often happens is they're like, "Oh, we're doing a new thing." And you do a new thing and you don't understand the bigger picture of why that new thing works for the company. It's never explained. So it's just like we're switching to this. And then people get frustrated because they don't have the context. They don't have the bigger picture. So like for example, like let's say you're using some Jira or some different project management tool or whatever, and you start moving over to Asana and you start integrating Asana in a culture. And most people are like, it's the same thing. Why are you wasting my time? Like, I don't want to use this. Everybody has their preferences. But if they understand maybe that like using Asana's dashboard systems and portfolios, we're trying to give a bigger view of the company. Like if they really get it, most people are rational enough to be like, okay, that's fair. Like this makes sense. Like, it makes sense that we're doing this, but it's usually not explained well. It's just like, hey, we're doing this, and people are like, oh God, I don't want to do this again, right? Like, and I think there's just a healthy starting conversation if people can just be like a little bit genuine, even where it's like, listen, I have no idea why we're doing this, but we have to. Like that's more genuine than anything else. Like just being very clear on why you're making the change from a top down level is incredibly important. And then how you deliver that message can have a pretty big impact.
No, that's a great point. I would love to be able to pull together like a leadership like session with all of our top leadership and have this discussion.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think each of our leaders at Comer, they do have this capability, but I think we could enhance even further because they have a natural, they have this from, it's probably how they rose to the level that they are. They naturally have this observation mode and a way to get buy-in with people, that small buy-in. But I think even for me, like I should be really good at this, but I think even personally, I may not be completely aware of like how I'm
Yeah.
coming across.
Yeah. I
So
mean, you never are. Like that's the trick. It's like that's why I'm trying to do all this stuff, is to show people like how other people, because you even if you ask for feedback, like getting feedback from people around you is so tricky too, because like feedback's usually like biased. If you ask a friend, they're too nice. If you ask a colleague, they might be too tough. Like it's really hard to. That's why we've like if you ask somebody, it's so interesting. If you ask someone after a conversation, like how did you like that conversation? People have a very difficult time answering. Like they just can't. Well, it was good. It was fine. It was. But if you make it more direct and you ask like prompted questions, things along the lines of like, if on a scale from 1 to 10, if you owned a business, how likely would you be to hire the person that you just had a conversation with? They're way better at it. They're like, oh, I would never
Oh,
hire that person. Or on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely would you bring this person to a dinner that you're attending? They're so that's when you get to really see people's perceptions. When it's connected to an outcome. How likely would you watch this kid? Would you this person watch this kid? Or like, how likely would you think this person would succeed at this role? Like, people are so much better. But when you ask just this like open-ended questions, they don't know really how to calibrate. So like a lot of our inventories are based on that, like based on trying to understand like what's a question that is at the undertone of understanding how someone trusts another person. Well,
hmm.
if we think about trust, we know like the highest point of trust would probably be family and livelihood and business, right? Like, and then you could triage that. So you could be like, how not triage it, but like layer it. So like, what is the level of trust that you would do for your family? So like, would you invite them into your home
Oh,
on a
that's
scale of one
pretty.
to ten, right? That's like
Yeah,
high trust. So like,
yeah,
it's interesting that certain people just off one conversation have already established a high level of trust with others, right? Then we could take it down and we could make it more trivial. Like, how much would you trust this person with like $100 of your own money? And it'd be like, I don't know. And you'll see certain people, for whatever reason, have high
right.
and low trusts, right? Like, and then you're able to figure out, reverse engineer what behavior is in alignment with that.
So this is a good segue into we need to wrap up here on the
Mm,
podcast. First of all, thank you very much for
of
coming
course.
back. I'd love to keep
Yeah, you
having
keep
you
doing
back. Not to put you on the spot. So,
it.
what'd you
Yeah,
think about this conversation?
it was
Like,
great. I mean, listen, so like this conversation was great, but it's unfair because you have more context.
true. Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
like what's interesting to me always is like the podcast or the conversations that are like minimal context. So the question is like where would this if we view this as a conversation and me and you were like complete strangers that never knew anything about each other,
Yeah.
like how would your ability to navigate that construct be? But you did great considering like I've had conversations with people that have had a lot of context and the conversations have been going well. But like, yeah, you asked very specific sort of focused questions, which were great. I mean, but yeah, it's more interesting when if you didn't know me, right? Like
Darn.
that,
Okay.
like that's but think about it because that's the if we look at conversations across the landscape of social interactions, the bulk of your conversations are going to be like that, right? And this is a weird conversation, it's a podcast. So
Yeah.
like this conversation has this construct of like other people are listening, you're trying to ask me questions that are like insightful and good for the audience and like so it's a different thing, but and that's a big one of the best ways of having good social interactions is to understand the construct that the social interaction is in. So like if you're having a one-to-one meeting, like sometimes like you have a one-to-one with an employee and it's like what is the construct of your one-to-one meeting? Is it are you trying to inspire them? Are you trying to figure out what's in their way and how you could help them? Are you trying to reprimand them? Like just understanding what the construct is makes it better. So because that's why probably like people are going to be better at a podcasting format because you know what the construct is,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
it's, but yeah, I mean, I think you're great. So I wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't. So there we go.
No, I think, honestly, my whole thing is I want to have podcasts that are more like a couple guys having or people having a conversation that you'd want to just listen in on,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, rather have that feel. But I think oftentimes I get wrapped up really easily in people's skill set, and it's very intriguing to me. So I tend to just ask
It's a
questions
good
that
qual I
relate
mean,
to
that's a
like,
good quality to have, like,
yeah,
you wanna be curiously engaged in the other person. It's gonna look a lot different if you're like, "Yeah, like, whatever, like, da da da, okay, sounds good." You know, we've listened to some of those podcasts before. It's like, "Do I even need to be here? Like, should I
yeah,
go?" You know, like, yeah.
yeah. I'm subconsciously trying to get a good grade is what's going on now. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, no, that's an interesting last point, like, so that's an interesting thing, right? Like, people show up in social interactions with that mindset, like, they want it to go well, they want it to be right, but, like, in order to get graded, you would have to come before this conversation, you'd have to list out, what do I want to happen? And how do I want this to go in order to actually be graded? That's why there's
Mm,
no such thing as a perfect social interaction. So like
right.
the only time we can measure perfect is like if you wrote down my goal was to have a conversation with Blake for 50 minutes and get 3 insights that I can use to cut up for social, you could easily measure that, right? Like, but when you're actually having conversations, it's very difficult to like, what's good, what's bad, what worked, what didn't work. Like, I've had conversations that are absolutely brutal with people, and I am assertive, and they don't like me. And then the last 5 minutes of the conversation, like, the conversation fundamentally maybe changes their life. But to get to that point, it wasn't easy. It wasn't fluffy. It wasn't all these things. So, like, I really, anybody that's in social interactions, like, really look at the mechanism at which you judge yourself in interactions, because a lot of it's not really based on anything that's real. It's just like your own weird stuff.
You know, it's so crazy. So again, I appreciate you coming on here. This stuff's so fascinating because it's so complex, but I don't think
Mm.
most people have any level of awareness. And yet, if they could get just a bit of coaching, they would be amazingly different,
Yeah,
like just
helps.
amazing. So I appreciate your time here. I hope we
Yeah,
get
of
a chance to
course.
do it again. This is
Yeah,
super
let me know.
fun. There's a ton of material here that I was like, hey, if we can take this little bit over here and we'll post that. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope we get a chance to see each other again soon and
Of
in
course, man. Catch up
our
soon.
other setting. But thank you very much, Wake. All right. Have a great day.
You too.